Hey, Chad here, your friendly neighborhood PAX tech guy. I made a mistake, and we don't have a video of Andy preaching today. But here's a picture of him, and another. Thank you for your patience as we continue to update and streamline our recording and sharing methods. While I'm here, feel free to subscribe, comment, share these videos, as we will be continuing to upload our Sunday services here on YouTube. Thanks. Enjoy the sermon. God bless.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Kezia. Go to God's Word now for today's message in Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6 today. As you are turning there, perhaps you have heard of a song that the great source of wisdom, Wikipedia, says is like one of the unofficial theme of Atlantic Canada. One of the unofficial themes of all the universities in our city. I know it well. I'm not sure if we all know it well. So I'm not going to sing it for you, and we can't sing. And I know if I sing the first line, if you know it, you will want to sing the second line back to me. This is like the song of Halifax. Oh, the year was 1778. You can say it back. Yeah. Barrett's Privateers by Stan Rogers. Yeah. Oh, that's a good song to sing. It's fun. We're not going to sing all the words, though, in church for a few different reasons. But what have you actually thought, what is that song about? And perhaps not, because you were in university when you sang it, and it wasn't usually in a time of intellectual reflection that you were singing it. If you really think about it, though, and for those of you who don't know, this song, it's a sea shanty, and it's about this guy who was promised an easy voyage, just come and work on this ship. It'll be great. But he now sits, and he says in the chorus, I was told we'd cruise the seas for American gold, we'd fire no guns, shed no tears. But I'm a broken man on this Halifax pier, the last of Barrett's privateers. And in the story, he tells you the ship, this easy voyage, he shows up with the ship. The ship is a wreck, not literally wrecked, but it's just a mess. It's ugly, it's worthless. They eventually find a ship with gold. They go after it. They're destroyed. All the crew dies, and his legs are blown off. And that's the story. And he's 16 years old, and it takes him I forget if it's 6 or 8 years to finally get back to Halifax. And now he's on the pier, legless. And he's in his early 20s. His life has actually been ruined from being lied to and destroyed on the job. It's a really intense song about job dissatisfaction. It is what it is. I was promised something was going to happen, and I got let down at work. That's basically what it really is about. And although you probably can't fully resonate with that story, the year is not 1778, but I think we all resonate with that feeling of job dissatisfaction, of whether it's actually being hurt on the job, maybe to take workers' comp, whether it's been these last 2 years of COVID, and maybe you've had to shift careers. Maybe work has gotten really hostile and fighting going on over restrictions and mandates. It's just a headache every time the government does change their mind. Yeah, you're happy we're going to sing next week, but with everything changing tomorrow, it's so many emails and so much paperwork, and it's just been tiring. I think we all have found work dissatisfying. Perhaps you've just struggled even to find a job, to apply and get something recently. The good news is the Bible speaks to us. speaks about employment, about work. God cares and is involved. And not just about employment. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but like just whatever we find ourselves doing and getting involved with, our disposition of wanting to be involved in work or be lazy. God cares about it. So we're going to look here today at Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. Proverbs 6, 6 through 11. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. This is the word of the Lord. As we look at the book of Proverbs and continue the sermons in this series, it is important for us to keep in mind that Proverbs aren't telling fortunes. They're not specifically saying this is always how life is, always ever. But it's generally things that are generally true. And that is a really helpful category for us, especially when with like work and laziness, we can be opinionated. We're such an opinionated people. A COVID first for me this week is I decided to watch Wednesday's update when they were giving the announcement on restrictions on Facebook Live instead of YouTube. It was way more interesting because Facebook Live has emojis that are going up the side. It was like these fireworks of emotion going on. There was the happy faces and the angry faces and little care hugs with their heart. I was actually like kind of watching it like a poll, like, oh, what's the population? Are we mostly angry right now? Like, let's get a feel for this. But it was apparent people were divided. People are very opinionated. And we can be about this situation too, about work. What do you think when you pull up to an intersection in Halifax and see someone begging? They're too lazy to get a job. You know, they could be out there working, they're just a con. Or are you sympathetic, thinking that's the most evil opinion somebody could ever have? We do have to approach Proverbs recognizing we do have our biases, and also realizing like Proverbs isn't going to cover every single area of work ever. But these are general truths that do apply to life, considering our work and our vocation. And the first principle that I want us to look at definitely applies actually in every specific situation. When it comes to work, when it comes to vocation, when it comes to our efforts, we have to work really hard at knowing God cares about our work. Point number one, work really hard. Work at knowing God cares about your work. Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He is the God who works. He isn't like the other mythical gods who want nothing to do with humanity, who sees creation and humanity as a nuisance. But no, he has rolled up his sleeves and he has created us. He formed us. He formed mankind out of dirt. He breathed into us the breath of life. He is a God who works. He is a God who creates. And in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, he charges Adam and Eve to fill the earth, to have dominion, to work the ground before sin came into the world. That is an important distinction. Your job is not the effects of sin. The effects of sin and brokenness and evil might be all over your job, but that's because of the curse. But the fact you have a job is God's good plan for humanity before anything was broken in our world. It was in the curse that Adam was told he was going to sweat. It would be painful. There would be thorns and thistles in work. But God charged us to work and to have dominion. He cares. And not simply about vocation either. Proverbs 31 actually has the largest section on dealing with like industry and work ethic and employment, and it's the Proverbs 31 woman, the good wife, which is really interesting. And like the categories weave in so much there, between like our two categories we have today, maybe like a woman who goes to work or stay-at-home mom. Like she's doing everything, it seems like, this Proverbs 31. And they didn't have like the 9 to 5 like we did today, but we see she's like industrious, she's buying fields, she's taking care of the kids, and even like her works are praised in the city gates, in Proverbs 31. And it's an all-encompassing interest and commendation for us, this woman in Proverbs 31. And perhaps even like you're tuning out already because like this is a sermon at work and you're a stay-at-home parent. But again, this isn't just employment. This is everything our hands find to do, God is interested in. And I do want to give a shout out to you stay-at-home parents, especially you stay-at-home moms who work with little kids, and we've had a lot of little kids in PAX. Sometimes you don't get a lot of credit. Sometimes it might feel like others have the opportunity for real work, and you're looked down on at home, and perhaps you don't get a lot of thanks. That little person that you care for 24/7 has never thanked you, ever. Instead, they vomit on you. That's what you get. When you try to change their diaper, they kick and they scream and they thrash, and you're just tempted like, no more diapers. If we did not have carpets, no more diapers. God is actually interested and cares about what you do every single day that you feel goes unthanked and unnoticed. I love the words of Martin Luther from 500 years ago. He says, "What then does Christian faith say to this? It opens its eyes. It looks upon all these insignificant and distasteful and despised duties in the Spirit, and is aware," this Christian faith is aware, "that they are all adorned with divine approval, as with the costliest gold and jewels. God with all his angels and creatures is smiling, not because the father or mother is washing diapers, but because he is doing so in Christian faith." Our work does matter to God. Another proverb, 16:11, says, "A just balance and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his." He actually goes on, and God tells us in a lot of the Proverbs when it comes to scales and weights that like an unjust scale is an abomination to him. He hates it when people get robbed. He hates it when you get robbed, swindled by someone. But here it's just all positive, that those weights, those balances, that measuring, that little boop, boop at the cash register, God is in that, and he cares. The cells and the spreadsheets in Excel that you do for work, every line is the Lord's. He cares about your job and how you do it. And even that might most feel like the most mundane, unspiritual task in the world, in the universe. Spreadsheets, pivot tables. God is there. He cares. Work hard. When you go to work tomorrow, this week, when you're applying for jobs, God is in it. He cares. Have to remember that. Therefore, it matters how we do work in the sight of God. So God cares. We should work on that, but we also need to work on the effectiveness of our work. Work at being effective in your job. It's really interesting in Proverbs, and I'm at times going to kind of like go rapid fire and just like list off a few Proverbs at once about work. But as I was looking at these Proverbs, and there's a ton of them, they seem really, really like lopsided. Because if I were to write the book, if I were to have a conversation about work, I would say there's like two dangers with work. There's the danger of not working, and there's the danger of overworking. But really, Proverbs generally only talks about the danger of not working. Why is that? I mean, listen to these verses, 28:19. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. 22:29. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. 12:24. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put into forced labor. 27:18. Whoever tends a fig tree will eat its fruit, and he who guards his master will be honored. And 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Why is it like just work is so good? Why don't we have that voice of like stop working, stop overworking, rest more, chill? I mean, that is the Bible. We do have commands for Sabbath, for rest. But I think there's a few reasons for this if we look closely at what Proverbs is saying. I think we do have to recognize there's a bit of cultural stuff going over there, or like small communities. Maybe it's just you and your farm. If you don't work, you are going to literally die because there is no system in place to take care of you compared to today. I don't think that's entirely it, though. I think there's two other reasons. I think the first one is that we don't naturally want to work. Kids, like parents, you know this. You didn't wake up today and your 4-year-old was like, Dad, I woke up before you and I saw there was laundry that needed folded, and you talked about like cleaning the garage, and I just did all that because I was bored. And we have to tell our kids, clean your room, turn off the video games, do your homework. Work is not natural for us. Peter Drucker, if you know who Peter Drucker is, you're one of my people. He was like a work consultant, an executive consultant. And he said this to his preface, which is a very boring name, The Effective Executive. But in the preface of that book, he says this. He says, in 45 years of work as a consultant with a large number of executives and a wide variety of organizations, large and small, businesses, government agencies, labor unions, hospitals, universities, community services, American, European, Latin American, and Japanese, I have not come across a single natural, an executive who was born effective. All the effective ones have had to learn to be effective, and all of them have had to practice effectiveness until it became a habit. But all the ones who worked on making themselves effective succeeded in doing so. Effectiveness can be learned. It also has to be learned. So even just in like God's common grace, this guy realized like no one's like natural at efficiency, at good work. You have to work at being a good worker. You do. You have to work on effectiveness. And yet, Proverbs does warn us about pursuing work for the sake of work, pursuing work for wealth. The Beatles once said, money can't buy me love. Good for you to hear that before Valentine's Day. That's no comment on how much you should spend or not spend on gifts or not. But that narrative, money will buy me love, money will fix all my problems, if I could just have more, I think is something we still hear and we still believe. Tom Brady, have to tie football in somehow today. Tom Brady, who just retired, said back in 2005, when he had won a few Super Bowls, 3, he said this, Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. But me, I think, God, it's got to be more than this. I mean, this can't be all what it's cracked up to be. The GOAT, the greatest of all time, feeling empty, still searching after 3 rings. One of the great philosophers of our day, Ariana Grande, has said, whoever said money can't solve your problems must have not had enough money to solve them. That was her way of putting it. And those popular messages still find their way into our heart. But Proverbs 23, 4 and 5 tells us, do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist, to stop. When your eyes light on it, it's gone. That satisfaction, that wealth disappears. It's gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings and flies like an eagle toward heaven. If you are working for wealth, if you are just working your butt off all day to get more, to find your satisfaction, you will be empty. Yes, we are warned about poverty. It says in Proverbs, a slack hand causes poverty. That illustration might be like a slack bowstring. But it says, the hand of the diligent, think of a tight bowstring, one that's effective, has good aim, makes rich. Really, over and over, if you actually pay attention to the Proverbs, not just work, not work hard, but work smart. Find someone effective and talk to them about how to work. That's one way Proverbs would encourage us. That's where, I know we haven't got there yet, but we're just about to. What Proverbs 6 encourages us to do. Look for examples of someone who knows how to work and learn from them. Even I just did an experiment this week. I just typed on the internet and Google and on YouTube, how to dig a hole. What you think I would be good at. It's not complicated, but I learned there's a way to dig a hole that I knew nothing about. That's proper digging techniques and methods, and I was digging wrong all my life. And you probably are too. We look to the ant here. Go to the ant, O sluggard, and there's a little sluggishness in all of us, for an example. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. So as we work to be effective, the ant is held up. She is held up for us. When I was in college, I went on a summer missions trip to Bermuda. And one summer I actually went for 2 weeks. The next summer I went for 8 weeks on this missions trip. And it was really cool. Bermuda's a beautiful, beautiful country. And you can tell where the rich people live because their roads are awful. In Bermuda, a lot of the side roads, not the main highways, are maintained by the residents of the road. And so those who don't have as much money, they have community barbecues and they all pitch in and they all get involved and their roads are nice. But the rich people are I'm not pitching into that. Somebody else can, and it's not going to be me. I like my money. So their it's full of potholes, all their roads. And I was up in kind of one of those communities, staying at someone's house, and they had this whole separate apartment building for me to stay in. And it was towards the end of our trip, and we at this church we were at, they just throw in this hey, summer camp's over, let's party, celebration, all the kids sing little church songs, and we'll all eat snacks. And so they had leftovers, and they gave me some, and I threw them in my rental moped and drove back to my apartment. I was tired after weeks of camp, and just threw the bag on the counter, went to bed. I woke up in the morning, I entered this kitchen, and I saw it. This line, this black line, all the way around, zigzagging in the most inefficient way. Literally all 4 walls, all the way around, up into the counter, into that bag of goodies that I had left on the counter. They had found my cookies, those ants. And then there was the same line going back the other direction, all the way around through this little crack in the patio door that I didn't quite close all the way. While I was sleeping, while I was resting, while I was unconscious, those ants came in, found my cookies, and organized themselves by the thousands to take them back home. It was an awful cleanup job. Those ants, We look to those ants for a few lessons. Number one, we look to them for drive. It says there of the ants, consider her ways without any chief or officer or ruler. No one's like watching this ant work. They don't need a supervisor all the time. Do you? I remember we had this customer service secret that I was led on by my other employees when I started working at Foodland when I was in high school. They told me, this is what you really do if somebody asks you, like, oh, I see, you're out of cat food on the shelf. Do you have any out back? What you would do is you just go out back and like over in this corner, the cameras can't see you, just like go on there and like check a few texts or whatever, and then just like come back out and say, hey, couldn't find any. I'm sure it'll be on like the next truck. That's I don't know, surely people don't do that to you anymore, but that's what we did in high school in Foodland. And that sense of just like going away where the cameras can't see you and slacking off. How well do you work when your boss isn't around? How well do you work when you have the floor, you have the office to yourself? How is your work ethic now that you're working from home instead of at the office? Do you always have to be watched, or do you have the drive to be an independent worker? The second lesson from the ant is a resilience, a determination. She's making bread, and you think of like kneading bread. Have you ever baked? It's hard work. She's doing it in the heat of the summer. She doesn't have excuses, but determination. Work hard. And she's also planning ahead. She's thinking of harvest time. She's gathering food in the harvest. She's preparing ahead. We're encouraged that in Proverbs 27, where it says, know the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. Know about your home. Plan ahead. Budget for the next season. Provide for yourself. Think, where does the business need to get in the next year? Know the condition of your flock. I think that's actually, if we could spiritualize that principle, important for us to know the condition of our church, the elders, but also one another. We are all in this flock together as sheep. Do you know one another and how we're doing spiritually together? It's an encouragement for us. We need to work hard on being effective, working hard like an ant. We need to work hard at knowing God cares about our work. He's involved in our work. But we also need to work hard on avoiding laziness, avoiding sluggishness. The four qualities I saw here of a sluggard, and I love even in that word we have the animal picture slug. It's not in the Hebrew, it's in Andy's interpretation of the English. But sluggishness, that little gross, is it an insect? A mollusk, yeah. It just crawls around, chews things, and if you ever pick them up, it gets on your fingers, that slime, it's hard to get off, and it's gross. The sluggishness of our souls and our hearts. And perhaps you say, Andy, don't worry, that's not me. I work so hard at my job. But what about when you go back home? Are you so tired from work that you're tempted just to fall on the couch and not pitch in and help out? Just to tune out and throw on sports or YouTube and not give a rip about what's going on in the evening and your home life? The Bible would say you are still a sluggard. A few things we see in the passage and also other Proverbs is one quality of the sluggard is indecision. A lazy person just can't make up their mind. They can't commit. Their favorite button is the snooze button. How long will you sleep? How long will you lie there? When are you getting up? Is the literal question for them. A little sleep, a little slumber, just a little more folding of my hands and rest here. 5 more minutes. They cannot decide. They cannot act. They have trouble saying yes to anything, or maybe even trouble saying no to anything. The sluggard. Also, there's a problem of follow-through with the sluggard, tied up in those words, oh, just let me rest, I can't commit right now. But even I love, and this is good for word for us tonight, when there will be chips and chicken wings around us, Proverbs 26:15. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. It wears him out to bring it back to his mouth. You reach for the Doritos, and you can't even. Too much work to bring it back to your mouth. That's the picture of the sluggard here in Proverbs. There's a lack of follow-through. A sluggard is one who promises he'll get the job done for you and never shows up. That's the sluggard. A sluggard always has excuses. Proverbs 22:13. The sluggard says, "There is a lion outside. I shall be killed in the streets." Now that actually sounds like a lot of wisdom. If there's a lion outside, I would tell my kids, don't go outside right now. There's a lion. You'll be killed in the streets if there is a lion out there. But that's not what the sluggard's saying. The sluggard is saying, I bet there's a lion out there. I bet there's a lion on Roby Street today. I don't know how, but there's got to be a lion. It's not safe for me to go hand out applications today. I think it might snow tonight. Probably should wait till spring. That's the sluggard. There's danger. Now, I want to be careful here. This is not to diminish the impact of our disease we've been through with COVID the last 2 years and the seriousness around it. But there is a way we may also be tempted, and this is something you've got to search your heart for, to use COVID as an excuse for sluggishness. Not just in work, but also in Christian duty. Whether that be safely attending church, or whether that be caring for one another and reaching out to one another and calling to people that just aren't on your mind anymore because you're not seeing them. If anything, this disease should push us into hard work and to love. And let that be our motivation, love. And that we care out and not just dismiss Christian care because we might get an infection. Now, that again, we've got to be careful. I get it. There are some of you who might be vulnerable, some people who aren't here, who are at risk. Absolutely, use precaution. I'm not saying that, but don't just use it as a mere excuse either. That's a hard issue. Not judge one another in that. The sluggard is indecisive. They don't have follow-through. They make excuses. And they also just plain hurt others. Like an archer who wounds everyone is one who hires a passing fool or a drunkard. If you've been a boss, you know this. You hire someone who's lazy. You hire someone who's a drunk, who's a fool. They're in danger of hurting everyone, actually physically hurting people. If you've ever been to a gun range, they are serious about the rules because they know if you just get out there and whip the guns around, that's very dangerous. Someone could die. There are rules and there's regulations, and you have to be trained before you can go there. It's just like hiring a fool, an archer who shoots everybody, and they die. It's so opposed to what we see in Proverbs 12:10. Whoever is righteous has regard for the life of his beast. He even cares about the animals. He cares about the tools he has for work. But the mercy of the wicked, it says, is cruel. Those who work hard care for those around them and the things around them. It takes good care on the job. There's also this sense of when we work and avoid sluggishness, we must be careful on our jobs. We must avoid sluggishness so we don't hurt others. We do need to hear that principle too. And it overflows here. That our jobs aren't just for ourselves. They aren't just for our wealth, as we talked about. But our jobs are for one another. They are for our community. You work so you can take care of the church. And I don't just mean tithes and offering, but to actually provide, to be hospitable, to care for one another. And in innumerable ways. Proverbs 10:5 gives us this warning. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Shame. This relational guilt. And even that word here, not just the man, but a son, a good son, gathers in summer. but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. That family relationship term is recognizing in these cultures, like everyone went to harvest, everyone helped out, and if you slept in, it was shame to your community. There's a danger that we've moved into thinking of our work as merely private. It's just for me, it's just who I am. That's sluggishness. We work for the greater good. We work for God. Our work is not private. We work hard, we avoid sluggishness, we're diligent, we work for God, we know He's involved in our work. But you might say, well, Andy, that's just all the sermon, that's super idealistic. You feel a little condemning, well, I got to work harder, not be so lazy. There's a lot that happens that's in your control, but I also do get there's a lot in your work that happens that is outside of your control. That you might have a boss who is deplorable in character, who makes all kinds of unethical decisions. You might have a workplace full of gossips. You may have injured yourself working, and that can be a life-changing experience where you might not be able to work like you ever have again. There can be all kinds of effects of sin on you. Not just what you're responsible for, but what was done to you outside of your control. COVID happened and it closed down the restaurant. It closed down your work. You were planning this project and you finally got the people involved, but then the investment dries up, and so much stuff can happen that our work is so affected by sin. We do have to realize our hope is not in tomorrow. It's not in this week. It's not in your job. It's not in retirement. If you are living just for your job, you are going to be let down. But the good news, Christian, is that God is redeeming all things for Himself, including your job. And I want to share this story with you. It's one I found from Timothy Keller, but he found it from J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings. And if you're not committed to read Lord of the Rings, which is phenomenal work of art, Lord of the Rings, I recommend this short story. It's 10 pages online. You can find it. Such a beautiful allegory. It's called Leaf by Niggle. Leaf by Niggle. Parents, all of us who just have kids, we just missed out on a great baby name there, Niggle. Leaf by Niggle is about this artist named Niggle, who's a decent artist. He's not that great. He's okay. And Niggle gets in his mind one day this beautiful idea for a tree. I'm going to paint this tree, he says, and he begins with this leaf and pours in all the details of this leaf, and then he adds some more leaves and some branches, and he's connecting it and adding a canvas here and more paints and colors here, and he's working on it for years. But the trouble is, life happens. His neighbor interrupts him, and his neighbor's house breaks or needs patching up, and Niggle has to go help with the work. Or sometimes neighbors just call him hey, Niggle, let's have tea. And he has to go have tea, and nobody even really cares about his art that much, he finds. Or he has to do his civic duties and all these other things. And what really gets Niggle is, even in all of this, even in the days where he's apathetic and doesn't work, he knows that someday they're going to come and collect him for a drive. They're going to take him away on a carriage ride, and he's never going to come back. It's an analogy in the story for death. And one day Niggle is there, he's in his cottage, and his artwork is there, and someone's actually there, this guy from the city, saying, Niggle, your neighbor has a leak on his roof. It'd be great if we could actually take some of your artwork and patch his roof with it. We think that's a great idea. And Niggle's no, this is my tree. I've been working on this for years. And then the driver shows up. Niggle, it's time for your carriage ride. I'm here to collect you. And he hasn't really packed. He's not prepared for the drive, but he has to go anyway. He says he actually goes in tears. He's on this carriage ride, and while he's away, they do take his painting and they patch the roof, and most of it's destroyed except one little leaf, one little canvas, and that gets hung in a museum, and underneath it says Leaf by Niggle, and eventually that museum burns down. The leaf's gone. No one remembers Niggle at all. But he's in his carriage, he's at the end of his journey, and he comes out over the hill, and he steps out. Now this is what Tolkien writes of Nigel. Before him, on that hill, stood the tree, his tree, finished. If you could say it of a tree, it was alive. Its leaves opening, its branches growing and bending in the wind that Nigel had so often felt or guessed and had often failed to catch. He gazed at the tree, and slowly he lifted his arms and opened them wide. It's a gift. It's a gift, he said. He was referring to his art and also to the result. But he was using the word quite literally. He went on looking at the tree. All the leaves he had ever labored at were there, as he had imagined them, or rather as he had made them. And there were others that had only budded in his mind, and many that might have budded if only he had the time. See, the point of that story is that we are all Nigel with our leaf, our tree, our painting, our job, our work, our calling. And distraction comes in, neighbors take us away, people take you out for coffee, and they don't really care about what you're doing for work, and then you die. And people forget your work. Most of us will die and be forgotten. That's just the truth. How many of us can remember our great-great-grandparents' names? That's the brutal reality. And if you're here today, not a Christian, that's got to hit you. That's it. Even what you're giving your life to, that's it. But if you are a believer, if you are trusting in Christ, you are going to a place where your work is actually perfected. Teacher, perhaps you've been teaching for years, and every year you walk away, I wish I could have just taught this one kid this one thing, but they could never get it. There's so much that I would have loved to cover if they just had paid attention. You see students go on and they make bad choices in their life. Some even commit suicide. Perhaps you're a home care hospital worker, and like 90% of the people you care for die. The economy crashes. The good news, teacher, you are going to a place where everyone will have perfect knowledge. Well, they will love the Lord with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Hospital worker, you are a doctor. You are going to the place where there's no more cancer and no more death. Those of you who work in finances, the street is made of gold there. We will see our tree. Work will be perfect there. It will be the garden again before the curse. And we work to be brought graciously into that day. We're going to go now to God in confession, trusting Him that He will redeem our work. As I pray, I'm going to leave it open for you to silently confess to God, and the music team, they can come up in that silence. So let's pray. Father, we confess to you, and even I confess to you, God, that in this sermon there can be a self-righteousness that comes up, that we can look around and think we will working harder than them. We make more money than them. Not as lazy as that guy. God, forgive us for our pride. Forgive us for when we overwork and neglect our family and the care of others, and when we don't leave room for your grace and your goodness to be worked out in our lives. God, forgive us for our laziness, our poor work ethic. And God, forgive us for not seeing the glory of you involved in our everyday lives, our everyday routines, our jobs, our caring for the kids at home, the volunteer work we do, God. Forgive us when we don't see you in it, when we don't work for your glory. God, we pray that for these sins and all others, you would forgive us. In Christ's name.